It's official. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act is now law, however that works. And we have for here an opinion piece from the New York Times. It's a collection of graphics. Thank you to the people of the New York Times. And I am analyzing them. Is that fair use? Let's assume. And we're going to look at these charts, the 10 charts, to talk about what it is. So the costs are by far making the individual tax cuts permanent, also increasing the standard deduction and increasing the child tax credit. And that the 2017 individual tax cuts, there's a number of different things in there. But you see the costs here, and then you see the ways to make more money. Changes to student loan payments, which I assume that means that it's going to be harder for students to pay their loans. Phase out of Inflation Reduction Act's tax credits, which is terrible news for me in particular, as this is, I think, one of the best pieces of legislation ever passed in my lifetime. It was until today the largest piece of climate legislation ever passed by any country in the history of the world. Bit of a bummer though. And then Medicaid cuts. You can see that the cuts do not make up for the costs, and so this is going to be something that everyone's going to have to pay for in the future. And the people who are paying less in taxes than they otherwise would are the ones who are passing that on to either students, people who get Medicaid, so this is money that would otherwise be paying for the health care of people who can't otherwise afford health insurance, or having less money to spend adapting our energy infrastructure for the future in which it matters that we're releasing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So those are the things that you're not paying for. And then the other way that money comes to you is by it becoming a loan that has to be paid back someday with interest. Millions lose access to Medicaid. How the bill would reduce Medicaid spending with work requirements, make it more difficult for states to fund Medicaid. So work requirements is a surprisingly small piece of this. That's the thing that I had heard the most about. Work requirements is a weird thing for Medicaid for me, because this, like, Medicaid is talked about by certain people as if it is a handout, but you don't get the money unless you have a bill from a hospital. It's not like you get to spend the money. You only, like, the money only comes in to pay for the costs of healthcare. Those people are still either going to go to the hospital, or they're just not going to get treatment. If they go to the hospital, they'll just get funded some other way. And do you end up in a situation where a lot of hospitals who have a lot of people who come to them, rural hospitals, a lot of people use Medicaid at those hospitals. Now those hospitals don't have enough income to stay open. But also, what you see is that when you actually break the data down, only something like 5% of people don't meet the work requirements, and yet they assume that like 13% of people are going to be cut out. So there's a bunch of people who are getting cut out not by not working, but by not being able to meet the ridiculous administrative burden of filling all of the paperwork all of the time. This is like the thing people don't like about government is the bureaucracy, and this just creates a bunch of bureaucracy to be like, here, have some bureaucracy, and it's going to be harder to get on Medicaid. Cuts are not only draconian, as the bill moved from the House to the Senate. About a third of the savings come from imposition of a work requirement on recipients. While Republicans claim they are only attacking waste, fraud, and abuse, the resulting paperwork to comply with the requirement is expected to daunt many and result in lost coverage. All told, these changes will cost over 10 million Americans their health care, according to the Congressional Budget Office. So that's not like some pundit somewhere. The cost of college. So how are we doing this? Average monthly student loan payments, you guys. Well, that's just gonna be, so we're looking at people paying, rent amounts in like the increase going from $228 to $600, from $145 to $350, just general doublings of the amount of money being paid by people according to their income. So if you're making $40,000 to $50,000 a year, which is probably where a lot of people are hanging out, you're paying $100 extra a month. And it does not seem like something that's going to be good for the economy, to have a lot of people who are just out of college have this extra burden on them. And how much money does it save? Enough to cover like 1/10 of the tax cut that mostly goes to the wealthy. Climate change. Clean energy investments announced since the Inflation Reduction Act in Republican districts and in Democratic districts. Spent and then pending. So the spent, obviously they can't take back. Some of the pending, I think that they are going to try to claw some of that back, but they're not doing all of it. And then that spending will just stop, even though there was a law that said that we could do it. Throwing a major roadblock in the way of combating climate change. Since the passage of the act, the United States has been experiencing a boom in clean energy investments. Many of these projects will very likely be abandoned. Most Republican legislatures are supporting this, despite the fact that the vast majority of these investments have taken place in Republican congressional districts where permitting is generally easier and weather can be more conducive to solar and wind power generation. There's more space out there in Republican districts. And this was a lot of the logic of the Inflation Reduction Act, that it would be hard to repeal because Republican senators would be like, well, that money's being spent in my district, or representatives, and so I'm not going to vote against repealing it. But what they didn't account for is that no one will do anything if Donald Trump tells them to do something else in the Republican Party. The biggest budget buster, relative scale of Trump's domestic policy. Like, the crazy thing about the bipartisan infrastructure law is that it was mostly paid for. Like, they mostly figured out how to pay for it, but not this. This is, I mean, it's like we're playing two different games. Like, the Biden administration, like, worked hard to figure out how to pay for the Inflation Reduction Act. Like, there was a lot of money spent, but there was a lot of ways that we were going to make that money up so that we could spend it. And this just doesn't, no interest in actually balancing the budget, which at this point is like a big deal. Like, I remember feeling like, oh, everybody always argues about the budget being balanced. But now what I'm hearing is that we have a big enough problem that if the debt continues to get just ridiculously way bigger, but I always hear Republicans being the one complaining about the size of the debt. I don't know. I guess if the deficit is created by tax cuts for the wealthy, then this is fine. Spending has drifted out of balance. Yes, it has. Remember in the year 2000 when actually we're making more money than we were spending? Holy crap. The resulting deficit puts our economy in a perilous place. Over the last 50 years, federal spending as a percentage of gross domestic product has averaged 21%, but since COVID-19 remained stubbornly above this average. Tax increases politically off the table. This means larger deficits. We have this interest on the national debt number, which I don't like the direction it's moving in. Of course, it has been this high before. And then, Medicare and Medicaid has increased from 1% in 70 to over 5% now. Defense has come down. Non-defense discretionary is lower, and this is all in terms of percentages. Bill is just the latest and worst example of a policy followed by both Republicans and Democrats. Take the easy way out and let deficits climb. Costs of Medicare and Medicaid are rising relentlessly and are now just over 5% of GDP. Social Security outlays have also grown, and now because of the increasing debt and higher interest rates, the cost of servicing the national debt has begun to soar. Allowing the 2017 tax cuts to expire, which effectively would have raised taxes on 62% of Americans, could have been highly unpopular, but also was necessary. Or we could have just kept the ones on people making less than $80,000 a year and raised pretty much the exact same amount of money. One big borrowing bill. Impact on deficit. Bill, if made permanent, bill as written. That's pretty bad either way. Impact on debt to GDP ratio. So we are at 100% debt to GDP right now, and we're just gonna blow on past that to over 120% in the next 10 years. That's just 10 years, you guys. I know maybe that seems like a long time to you, but I'm old enough now that that's so soon. The more you make, the more you benefit. So the bottom 20% of American households are losing on this, probably mostly because of changes to SNAP and Medicaid. Yep, and then there's changes to taxes. What a terrible thing to do. And the thing to know is that in dollar amounts, this is way bigger than the percentage amount because, of course, if you're, in the middle here, your income is probably, $70,000, $50,000, $40,000 a year, somewhere in there. And so a 1.5 percentage point increase is a lot different than if you're up here at $100,000 or $200,000. And the economic benefit is negligible. White House predicts much more growth from this bill than other models. There's the White House Council of Economic Advisors, and then there's the Congressional Budget Office, which is a nonpartisan thing. Yale Budget Lab actually shows it going to negative benefit, which makes sense to me if you have all of these people with student loans who suddenly have way less money to spend, are paying an extra $100, $200, $300 a month. Or more. I mean, that in particular feels levied at intentionally the kinds of people that Donald Trump himself just doesn't like, because they're less likely to vote for him if you have a college degree. So those are our 10 charts. Those are our 10 charts explaining this situation from the New York Times. Thanks for giving me a little something to latch onto, though it does not feel encouraging.